Welcome to Empowered by Iron, hosted by Dr. Kristin Lander from Fiercely Fueled Nutrition Coaching and Mary Morton from Grad Gains, the online resource for your fitness needs. Together, we are empowered by iron. Hey guys, welcome to Empowered by Iron. This week we are actually going to be having more of a informational topic. We're going to talk all about carbs and how you can manipulate your carbs for recovery and performance in the gym. So we're pretty fired up about this one. We've all heard the controversy over carbs. I'm assuming Atkins versus paleo versus low fat, high fat, what have you. So today Kristin's going to kind of talk to us about carbs and how she approaches them with her athletes, specifically for training, and how they can use carbs, or how you guys can use carbs for your performance and recovery in the gym. So Kristin, take it away.
All right, so I work with athletes to help them improve their performance in the gym as well as their physique. Usually we're working on either fat loss or muscle gain, and to be honest, we're oftentimes doing both at the same time. So they're getting leaner and gaining muscle at the same time, which is really hard to do, but definitely possible. And what makes that possible is implementing a whole lot of science.
Science works.
Science works. So I'm a huge fan of giving my athletes all of the carbs. And lucky for them, there's a lot of evidence to support doing so. It has to be done at appropriate times for it to be favorable for performance as well as body composition, though. So, like you mentioned, Mary, it is a really controversial topic for some reason. I'm not really sure. There's just a lot of debate out there and a lot of information. And I think as people sort through it, I don't know if people are always looking for the next best thing or what have you, but, there's
probably a lot of misinterpretation, right?
Yeah. And I think applying certain principles to like the wrong situation. So, well, I think a paleo diet, Atkins, ketogenic diet, I think they all have their place. I think there's certain populations of people that those are very good nutritional plans to follow. But they just don't give the kind of results to athletes that high carbohydrate diet does. So the bottom line is, if you're an athlete, carbs are the best and easiest source of energy to be able to perform at a high level and also to recover quickly from training. A lot of people don't know about the whole recovery bit, so we're going to get into that. And then just as a side note, you can follow if you love a paleo diet, like if you want to eat grain-free and have lots of veggies and limited processed foods, you can do all of that stuff on a high carbohydrate diet. Paleo does not have to be low carbohydrate, and I think a lot of people have started figuring that out. But the only difference would be if you're on a high carbohydrate diet, you can't also be eating high fat. So if you're following paleo, you have to dial some of the fat back a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about why carbs are necessary. So I told you they're important, but you need to know why they're important. So carbs are necessary for optimal performance during intermittent high-intensity training as well as prolonged training. So those words, intermittent high-intensity, I think encompass probably anything all of our listeners do. So whether it be CrossFit, some sort of circuit training, HIIT training, I would even put weightlifting or powerlifting in that category.
Absolutely,
because it is intermittent high intensity when you lift a very heavy load.
Yep. And then take a 10-minute nap after.
Yeah, don't forget the nap. So carbs are also necessary for cognitive and motor skill execution. So,
oh my goodness. So, quick side note, when I decided to cut all my carbs from my diet, I was also in my undergrad education. I remember being so brain dead. Not only was I physically tired, I could not put two and two together. I was just so, my cognition, my brain function was almost at zero.
Yeah.
So I figured that one out pretty quick after that.
Yeah, I think probably most people have experienced the low carb brain before, so that it's definitely not a fun thing. And then the most important thing in terms of what we all do is that carbs are necessary for working muscles. They provide energy for working muscles. So we need them. The question is, how much do we need?
And when do we need them?
So the International Olympic Committee guidelines for daily carbohydrate intake for athletes is between 5 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight, depending upon the type of exercise you do. But let's talk about that for a minute, because that's a lot. So I weigh 66 kilos, which is about 145 pounds if you don't kilo.
If you don't kilo.
So 66 kilos times 5 would be 330 grams of carbohydrates that I need every day.
Like a minimum.
Minimum for
awesome.
Like moderate intensity training and trying to maintain body weight. At the high end would be 792 grams of carbs a day. Now that's going to be very high intensity training or very prolonged training.
Or double sessions, stuff like that.
Right. Or like a Tour de France cyclist, something like that.
Right.
So now I think that these guidelines, 5 to 12 kilograms per pound of body weight, or excuse me, per kilogram, 5 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. I think is probably a little bit high for most of us, but it should definitely make you question a low carb diet for athletes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I like to use carbs as a tool for training for my athletes. So I have them eat the bulk of their carbohydrates surrounding their training. So pre-workout nutrition impacts your performance. So that is like what you eat before the gym is going to impact how you perform in the gym that day, which relates to long-term performance gains.
Which is why I have pancakes every day before I go to the gym.
You do?
I
awesome. And then your post-workout nutrition impacts your recovery. So what you eat after you go to the gym is going to be a really big player in how hard you can go tomorrow.
Which is also why I have pancakes after the gym, too. I just love pancakes.
Pancakes are never wrong. So
what you're saying is that before you work out, you need carbs because they're going to give you energy, so you're not going in lethargic and tired. And you should probably eat them within a window, you would say. So, like, if I eat lunch at noon and I train at 4, I probably should have something at, what would you say, 2 or 3?
Well, so it's a really good question, and it's dependent upon the person. So you need to increase the muscle glycogen levels for performance. So those are the amount of usable energy that's stored in your muscles.
So glycogen, your muscles use that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sugar, breaks down into sugar. Your body enters the bloodstream, and your body uses it, and
you feel energized.
You feel great. So you want to have about 30% of your daily carbohydrates in the 1 to 5 hour window prior to training. Some people would do better in a 1 to 2 hour window, and others would do better closer to the 5 hours. So, for instance, if you are, most of us here are strength athletes, I think, but say you can also do endurance stuff. So say you're going to go on like a 100-mile bike ride. You probably don't want to have a full belly when you go out on that bike ride. So you might do better pushing that back closer to the 5 hour window.
Or take more liquidy carbs, but that's
right.
Dependent on the person, right?
Dependent upon the person. Yep. So it's like I said, some people do better in the 1 to 2 hour window. Some people do better closer to 5 hours. What I tend to do is I start splitting it up about, you also have to make it fit your schedule, right? Like
right.
If you're at work, depending on your job, you might not be able to eat at that time. So you have to go by that as well.
Figure it out, yeah.
Right. So,
So for me, for example, I've tried to do like 3 to 4 hours or 3 to 5 hours. That doesn't work for me. Like if I eat, I get so tired. I get to the gym and I'm just lethargic. But I've noticed that if I eat within an hour to an hour and a half right before, and it's something kind of quick and not as dense, like pancakes, for example, I have a lot of energy and I feel really good. So now let's move into kind of something else?
Yep, something else.
All right, what else should we know about?
There is one thing, since we're talking about these carbohydrates before, there's one thing that everyone should know about, particularly if you are the type of person who plays with your diet a lot. If you probably want to limit carbohydrates 30 minutes prior to working out. There's something that can happen. It's rare, but I think it's a lot more common with women, is you can get something called reactive hypoglycemia. So it's a drop in blood sugar. Reactive, meaning it's because of what you ate 30 minutes prior and then you went and worked out. So if you eat in that 30-minute to immediate window, you can experience some dizziness, increased hunger, increased heart rate, nausea. It's rare, but some people are really sensitive to that. So I say, if you ever experience those symptoms, just push your food back a little bit. Just don't eat 30 minutes prior to the gym. But all of that can be negated by having intra-training carbs. So that's another way that you can manipulate things, is if you know, like, I have to eat this food and then I have to go right to the gym, but I know I'm prone to getting low blood sugar, reactive hypoglycemia, I'm gonna take some Sour Patch Kids with me and eat them during my training, and you should be fine.
Yeah, something quick.
Something quick and sugary. Yep.
So then after you've done that, you worked out, now you go home. Let's talk about your post-training carbs, your recovery.
Yeah. So post-training carbs are essential for recovery. The goal is to replenish the depleted liver and muscle glycogen that we talked about, the sugar stores. So exercise stimulates glucose uptake, so sugar uptake, 1 to 2 hours post-exercise, and increases insulin sensitivity. So that means that your body is like really primed in the immediate to 2 hours after you eat to take up and replenish that sugar. So you want another 30% of your carbohydrates in the immediate to 4 hours after your workout.
So you want 60% of your carbs floating around your workout.
That's right. 60% of your carbs are going to be surrounding your workout. If you need intra-training carbs, which I really recommend for athletes that have like really long training sessions or really hard training sessions, say you're doing like Smolov or a Russian squat cycle, you've got really, really, really heavy squats, and you did other things before that, I say, eat some sugary food during your workout, and then count those as I count them as my post-workout carbs.
Just 60% kind of surrounding.
60% surrounding, yep. And so it's really important to note that for both the pre and the post-training carbs, you want like sugary carbs, you want high glycemic carbs, which is kind of funny because they're the carbs that, like, we've all been programmed not to eat. So
the candy.
It's the candy. So you want something with a glycemic index of over 70. So you just Google the glycemic index, find something that's over 70 on that scale. So those things are going to be like white potatoes, pure glucose, pretzels, Gatorade, bagels, rice cakes, watermelon, surprisingly, is in that.
Pancakes?
Yeah, I mean, pancakes are probably in there. Popcorn, shredded wheat, cornflakes, yeah, probably in there. I don't know your specific brand, but I would say they're probably in. So you need those high glycemic carbs, over 70 on the glycemic index scale. And then post-workout, you want to put some protein with those carbohydrates. So a lot of people, like, we've been programmed to think like, oh, I worked out and now I'm going to have a protein shake. And then that's it. But that doesn't really do you a whole lot of good.
It doesn't sound like it.
You need the carbohydrates. And what you need is a 3-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein. So a lot of protein is typically around, per serving, like whey protein, 20 grams.
20 to 25.
Yeah. So then you want to triple that, and that's the amount of carbs that you would have. So like my favorite protein is 22 grams of protein per serving. And so I put, and it's got about 10 grams of carbs already in it. And so then I have another 50 to 55 grams of carbs. post-workout. Yep. And the reason for this is the amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. So those amino acids in the protein assist with the carbohydrate absorption. So you can actually skip the protein if you want and just have the carbohydrates, but never skip the carbohydrates.
Interesting. I've never heard it that way.
Yeah.
But that makes sense now that you've explained it.
Yeah. Right. And people don't know this stuff.
And that is the thing that they're taught, though. Afterwards, you need to have your protein shake, and then that should suffice. But in reality, you need to have your carbs. And if you want protein, you should have protein.
Right.
I mean, it'd be ideal. I know the ideal situation, you should have protein and carbs, low fat, post-workout. But that's a whole other topic.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about that just really quick, though. The fat component, very briefly, is that fat slows the digestion of carbohydrates and protein in the stomach. So like the contents don't leave your stomach and get digested if there's fat with them. It's very slow, which is why nutrition experts that are not dealing with athletes say, well, at every meal you should have protein, carbohydrates, and fat.
Yes.
But the
rules are broken for athletes. Yeah,
that's right. The rules are broken for athletes. So do not have fat in your pre and post training meals.
Or keep it to a very minimum.
Yep.
Like I keep it below 10 grams.
Yes.
Usually. 10
grams. I say you can get away with 10 grams in your pre-workout meal, but I say no fat until 2 hours after.
Yeah.
Just completely avoid it. Maybe your whatever you have with your protein, maybe you're going to get like 1 to 2 grams. That's okay. But I wouldn't do any more than that.
Yeah.
So we had put a call out to our listeners on Instagram and I think on Facebook,
yes.
Asking what questions you guys had about carbohydrates, and we got a few really good questions, so we're gonna address those now.
Cool.
So one of the first questions was, are all carbs created equal?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question.
Just like we've discussed, just like you just said about the glycemic index.
Right. So my question to that is like, yes and no, because there is the whole component of like, well, I mean, there's a little bit of calorie in, calorie out, which I don't completely buy into, but if you're just counting your macros, then yeah, all carbs are fine, but not when we're talking about pre and post workout nutrition.
Very different.
So like I mentioned, ironically, the carbs that we've been programmed to not eat are the carbs that you want to eat.
Yeah.
That you need to eat pre and post workout. But like you can't live off of sugar and like processed crap. Like that's not good. That makes you more prone to diabetes and cancer. They're essentially void of nutrients. Like it's just carbohydrates.
It's just to give you a high, just to get you going.
That's right. Yeah. To give you some energy. And these things do lead to unstable blood sugar. So they don't keep you satisfied for very long. So if you're just like living off of rice cakes, right when you get up in the morning, or like really sugary cereal, those are not.
You will crash.
Yeah, exactly. It makes for unstable blood sugar, but it's very helpful surrounding your workouts.
Right. So if you were to have an example, what would be a good example of a more slow digesting carb that would keep you satisfied? Like what do you have for, say, breakfast versus what do you have for your pre-workout?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So remember we talked about 60% of your carbohydrates are surrounding your workout, right? So that leaves, if you work out in the afternoon, that leaves your breakfast and your dinner, you don't have a whole lot of carbohydrates. So I really like to rely on vegetables, sweet potatoes, squash, things like that. You can do oatmeal if you have enough carbs left. After you divvy up your 60%, if you have enough left, you can have oatmeal in the morning is a great one. But for those meals, I do higher fat and lower carb.
That keeps you fuller longer because they're slow digesting.
Absolutely, yeah.
That makes sense. All right, next question.
So the next question is, how many carbs does a woman need to bulk?
Good question.
It's a really good question, and I wish I had a really, really easy answer. But it's dependent on so many factors. So I'm going to try to break it down for you.
Well, let's take a step back before you do that, because there's different bulking. There's like the old school bulking where you just eat until you can't eat anymore, and you put on a lot of fat, and yes, you put on a lot of muscle. But then there's this new bulking that people are realizing you can do, which is called lean bulking, where you stay about the size that you are,
right,
at least physically your inches may not change all that much and your weight may stay the same, but you're kind of exchanging the fat for the muscle. And it's not really an exchange, but you're losing fat.
You're losing fat and gaining muscle, so the scale might not change a whole lot.
Exactly.
Right, which is exactly what I was going to get into.
Sorry.
You read my mind.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's dependent on like what your current total daily energy expenditure is. So that's something that I calculate for my athletes whenever they start with me. I calculate their it's TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. And then I need to figure out like, are you trying to stay lean while you're trying to bulk, or do you not care? And then it's also really important to like, what is your training like? Are you doing CrossFit? Are you weightlifting? Are you doing any cardio? How many days a week are you doing? Are you doing 1 a days? Are you doing 2 a days? Are you doing CrossFit and running and strength training? Like what your TDEE is going to be really, really, really high, and you're going to need a lot more carbohydrates. If you're just like doing some lifting 3 days a week, you might not need that many carbohydrates.
Right.
So let's go back to those IOC guidelines, the International Olympic Committee guidelines of 5 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. So a weightlifter or a power lifter with like no cardio in their programming can probably get by on the low end. And if you do that, so you do 5 times your body weight. So
in kilograms.
In kilograms, not pounds. So the conversion's 2.2. So take your body weight, divide it by 2.2, multiply by 5, and there's your number.
Ugh, that sounds like math.
It's not that hard. So start with that number. And if you start gaining undesirable weight, cut them back. If nothing's happening, bump them up. But do not underestimate how long it takes to actually put on muscle. So This is something that several of my clients get frustrated about, and we have a discussion about it, and then they're like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. So the average trained male can put on about 1 pound of lean muscle in about 3.5 to 4 weeks. If they're putting on any more weight than that, it's probably fat.
Right. This is a natural athlete.
Right. Yeah. Not if we're talking about drugs, break all the rules.
Another game.
So if you're on PEDs, then you follow your own rules, and I don't know anything about that. But so then women, we don't have as much testosterone, so that means it takes us double the amount of time in general to put on lean muscle than men. So that's about in 7 weeks. A woman can look at putting on about 1 pound of lean muscle. So that's 7.5 pounds in a year that you can look at putting on. Now, don't be discouraged by that number, because 7.5 pounds of lean muscle, you're going to look drastically different.
Very different.
Right.
Very different. So going back to the question,
yeah,
it sounds like it just depends on your body type and what your goals are, like how many carbs. Obviously, you need to be eating more, and you need to not be in a dieting down stage.
Right.
But it's just the amount of more.
Right. Yeah, like how much more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point. If you're at all in a caloric deficit, so if you're trying to, get leaner or whatever, if you're in any sort of caloric deficit, it's going to take you much longer. You might put on some muscle.
Right.
I mean, I work with athletes that are cutting weight classes or trying to reduce their body fat, and we see some dramatic changes. And actually, this is really important, because some people get really frustrated with this, that are cutting. They're in a weight class sport. They want to cut a weight class. Okay.
Right.
So we're going to manipulate your diet so that you are losing fat while we're trying to spare muscle and maintain strength. But it's really common. I have several women that I'm working with right now. They put on, their bodies are so efficient at building lean muscle. Their body weight is not changing. They are getting leaner and leaner and leaner and leaner, and their body weight's not changing. They're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. They're putting on muscle, which is awesome, except if you're competing in a body weight sport and you had your heart set on getting to the next weight class down, that might be a little bit difficult. It can still be done, but you are going to spare some of your strength doing that. I mean, you're going to lose some of your strength doing that.
Yeah,
you're not going to spare.
Strength,
right.
Some of your strength's going to go down.
Right. But it is really common. Like if you're doing it correctly, you can put on lean muscle while you lose weight or lose fat, excuse me.
Well, it sounds like also, guys, like if you are going to bulk, don't do like, I'm going to bulk for 3 weeks and then cut. Like you really do need to commit to it and say, look, because just like Kristin said, 7 weeks is about how long it takes for you to put on a pound of lean muscle. And that's if you're eating right and you're doing things right. So give yourself a while. Be patient with yourself. Be patient to put on the muscle because it'll be worth it in the end. If you're always in a caloric deficit, you're not going to get strong. Let's be real. All we want to do is get strong.
Right. That's all we want to do. So I definitely be patient with it. And then I recommend like having some sort of objective measure. So take weekly progress pictures in like a bathing suit or sports bra, something where you can really see what's happening with your body, and go several months and compare them, because you might feel like nothing's happening, and then you go back and you look at your like beginning pictures and you're like, wow, my back is ripped, I have some quad separation, like my quad size is much bigger, so you take measurements as well, like take measurements of your quads, of your hips, of your arms, some sort of objective testing measure. I also really like doing like water or air displacement testing, so like a dunk tank or a bod pod. If you live anywhere near like a major university, a lot of them have those available. You can go in and do those testing, and so give it some time, patience, be patient, have some objective measures, not just like what you think is happening, because scale. Yeah, the scale's a really good tool to know what's happening to know that something is happening with your body, but it's not a very good tool to know what that something is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that hit that nail on the head right there.
Yeah. So whoever asked that, I hope I answered your question as best I could.
So Kristin, if people are interested in coaching services, there's a lot of coaches out there. But you are also a coach, so how can they find you? Where can they find you? How can they contact you? Because sometimes you do need that objective voice that isn't your own, because let's be real, it's really hard to be objective with yourself unless you've actually taken the time to learn that about you. So how can they find you?
Yeah, so my coaching company is called Fiercely Fueled Nutrition. I'm on Instagram at Fiercely Fueled Nutrition. My website is fiercelyfueled.com.
Cool.
Or fiercelyfueled@gmail.com. You can email me any questions. I'll answer any questions as best I can, with whatever information I have about you.
Awesome. Well, if you guys have any more questions or want your questions answered and have a whole episode dedicated to it, leave us a comment on our Facebook or on our Instagram posts. You can also email us at empoweredbyiron@gmail.com. And we love to take suggestions. Like we said before, this is about you guys and about building a community. So whatever you have in mind, we're receptive. So until next time, we'll see you, or we'll listen. You'll hear us in a couple weeks or a couple days.
And eat your carbs.
Eat your carbs.
If you like what you heard today, please help us connect with other female badasses. We would love if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Tell your friends about us. Visit our website, which is empoweredbyiron.com. You can find each of us on Instagram. Mary is at MaryMo_92, and Kristin is at Kristin with an I, Lander. Future topics will include nutrition, programming and training, mental health, and just general female badassery.
Yeah, so let us know what you want to hear. If you have any input, that'd be awesome. And guys, this is Empowered by Iron. We want it to be a resource and an outlet for women who are finding their confidence, their independence, and their strength through iron. So thank you for listening. Thank you for checking in. And until next time, I'm Mary.
I'm Kristin.
And this is Empowered by Iron.